It starts with a timestamp in a server room in Tel Aviv. Not a dramatic explosion, not a missile, a flicker, a cursor blinking where there should be numbers. Inside the Bank of Israel's primary clearing network, the real-time gross settlement system that processes hundreds of billions of shekels every single day, something is wrong. The screens go blank, not offline, not frozen, wiped. And somewhere in a Telegram channel monitored by fewer than 40 analysts worldwide, a single message appears in Farsi. 3 words, translated, "The debt is paid." Nobody outside of a classified briefing room knows this yet, but here's what you need to understand right now before anything else. There is a third party in this story. Not American, not Israeli, not Iranian. Someone who has been sitting in the shadows of this entire conflict for 33 days, watching, waiting, and feeding information to all 3 sides simultaneously. We'll get to who that is. But first, you need to understand how we got here. Rewind 33 days, February 28, 2026. Coordinated military strikes involving the United States and Israel targeted locations in Iran, and international media confirmed that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in the strikes. The operation had 2 code names, Operation Roaring Lion for Israel and Operation Epic Fury for the United States, targeting Iranian leadership, nuclear facilities, and military sites. Within hours, the retaliation began. Missiles, drones, and something else, something quieter, something that moves at the speed of light through fiber optic cables buried under the Persian Gulf. The Cyber Islamic Resistance, a pro-Iranian umbrella collective coordinating multiple hacktivist teams, launched synchronized DDoS attacks, data wiping operations, and website defacements against Israeli and Western infrastructure. Signal number 1. This wasn't improvised. This was pre-planned, pre-positioned. The access was already inside the networks. It had been there for months. Iran treats cyber operations as a core instrument of national power. Iranian operators blend espionage, disruption, data theft, wiper attacks, and influence campaigns, and they favor asymmetric targeting. That last word is everything. Asymmetric. Iran cannot match the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group. Iran cannot match 72 F-35s. But Iran can make your ATM stop working. Iran can make your bank think you have $0. And that is exactly what happened this morning. Israel's National Cyber Directorate said it is detecting and countering a wave of cyber attacks attributed to Iran aimed at destroying data and systems at Israeli companies and organizations in what it described as a campaign spanning multiple sectors of the economy. Multiple sectors. Read that again. This is not one bank. This is not one system. The FAD team, the Fatimiyun cyber team, is composed of pro-regime actors who focus on wiper malware and permanent data destruction. Wiper malware. That means there is no ransomware. There is no ransom demand. There is no negotiation. The data is gone. The records are gone. Not encrypted, gone. In past Iranian cyber campaigns, attacks hit 46 major financial institutions, with up to 140 gigabits of garbage data per second, causing tens of millions of dollars in damages. This morning's attack is different. This morning is not about damage. This morning is about a message, timed to arrive at a specific moment in a specific negotiation. Because here's what nobody is telling you. Right now, as you watch this, there is a peace process happening. A real one. A fragile one, and it is 48 hours from either saving the Middle East or collapsing it entirely. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff confirmed presenting 15 points to lead to a peace plan through Pakistan as a mediator. Iran countered with its own 5 conditions in return, including war reparations and rights over the Strait of Hormuz. 15 points versus 5 conditions. That gap is the entire distance between civilization and catastrophe. And President Trump, facing a deadline of his own making, delayed that deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or face destruction of its power plants, pausing it to Monday, April 6, 2026, at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. April 6, that is 4 days from now. 4 days. Pakistan has been facilitating the contacts between Arachi and Witkoff in recent days. Pakistan also hosted talks with Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey last weekend to try and build momentum for direct talks between Iran and the United States. Islamabad, the world's most unlikely diplomatic capital in 2026, a city most Western analysts would never have predicted as the center of gravity in a conflict reshaping the entire planet. But here we are. Pakistan appears to have already helped exchange proposals between the 2 sides, relaying a set of American conditions for a ceasefire to Tehran, and also conveying Iranian responses back to Washington. When Pakistan's Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, posted support for dialogue on X, President Trump immediately reposted it on Truth Social. The timing of the repost appeared to signal that Washington was using Pakistani channels to reach Iran. That is diplomacy conducted through social media. Welcome to 2026. Officials suggest that if current contacts hold, talks between U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi could take place within days, potentially in Pakistan. Within days. That means this weekend. That means the cyber attack this morning landed, not by accident, on the eve of the most critical diplomatic window since the February ceasefire collapsed. And now we need to talk about the hardliners, because there are people in this story who do not want a deal, who have never wanted a deal, and who are actively working to destroy it. A person briefed on Israel's thinking told NPR that Israel is concerned about the U.S. handling possible negotiations with Iran, and that Israel's influence over these negotiations is going to be very limited. Very limited. That is a polite way of saying that Benjamin Netanyahu is sitting in Jerusalem watching Steve Witkoff negotiate a peace deal with the country that has been firing missiles at Israeli cities, and Netanyahu has essentially zero leverage to stop it. Israel hacked a popular Iranian prayer app to send notifications to potentially millions of phones, urging the country's military personnel to defect from the regime. The same week peace talks were being organized. Think about that. One hand extending an olive branch, the other hand hacking prayer apps and accelerating strikes on Isfahan. A person briefed on the operation told NPR that the Israeli military is speeding up its targeting in Iran over the next 48 hours, focusing on trying to hit Iran's arms factories as much as possible, in case a ceasefire is declared. In case a ceasefire is declared, Israel is racing the clock. Every hour without a ceasefire is an hour Israel can degrade more Iranian military infrastructure, and Tehran knows this, which is why the IRGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, is doing everything possible to harden its position before any deal can be signed. Here is the catch, and this is the pivot that changes everything you just heard. The Iranian regime is fracturing from the inside. According to an analysis in Iran International, Trump's statements were succeeding in lowering oil prices while also fracturing the Iranian regime. Fracturing, that word. It has never appeared in any serious analysis of Tehran's power structure before. Iran's clerical establishment has always presented a unified front. Always. Even during Stuxnet in 2010. Even during Maximum Pressure in 2019. But today is different. Iran has asserted that Lebanon must be included as part of a ceasefire deal, thereby making a ceasefire conditional on an end to the 2026 Lebanon war against Hezbollah. That demand did not come from President Pezeshkian. It did not come from Foreign Minister Arachi, who has been the voice of pragmatism throughout this crisis. That demand came from the IRGC hardline faction, the generals who have the most to lose from any deal, because any deal means accountability, and accountability means trials. Arachi confirmed he had held conversations with Witkoff, Trump's trusted envoy. I receive messages from Witkoff directly, as before, he said, but added, there is no truth to the claim of negotiations with any party in Iran. He is protecting himself. He is signaling to the hardliners inside Tehran that he is not selling out. He is performing denial to stay alive, politically and perhaps literally. Because the IRGC generals are watching, the Quds Force remnants are watching, and they just watched their Navy commander get killed. Israel's defense minister said his country had killed Ali Reza Tangsiri, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Navy, in an overnight strike. Tangsiri is gone. That is not a small thing. That is the man who controlled the naval assets in the Strait of Hormuz, the strait that Iran is still holding hostage. Now, the strait. You need to understand the Strait of Hormuz the way an oil trader understands it. The strait is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. 20% of the world's oil and gas passes through it in peacetime. 20% of global supply. Right now, it is closed, partially. Iran has a chokehold on it. Not a total blockade, but enough friction, enough threat, enough mines and patrol boats to drive insurance premiums through the roof and reroute tankers on 14-day detours around the Cape of Good Hope. If the strait closes completely, oil hits $200 a barrel within 72 hours. Energy analysts at Goldman Sachs have modeled $250. If oil hits $250, the S&P 500 drops 20% in 1 week. Gas at the American pump hits $9 or $10. And that is the scenario Trump is trying to prevent by April 6th. Iran rejected the 15-point peace plan presented by the U.S. Iran presented 5 counter-conditions: the end of attacks by the U.S. and Israel on Iran and on pro-Iranian forces in Lebanon and Iraq, the creation of mechanisms to prevent the resumption of war, compensation for the damage, and international recognition of Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Sovereignty over the strait. Read that carefully. Iran is not asking to keep the strait closed. Iran is asking for permanent legal recognition that it controls access to 1/5 of the world's oil. Washington has called that demand likely unacceptable. The Iranians call everything Washington wants excessive and unreasonable. They are talking past each other, through Pakistan, in the most expensive long-distance phone call in human history. And now we get to the third party. The one mentioned at the very top, the one sitting in every room simultaneously. Pakistan's army chief, General Asim Munir, appears to have quietly positioned himself for more than a year as a conduit between Tehran and Washington. A conduit, not a mediator, a conduit. There is a difference. A mediator presents both sides' positions fairly. A conduit selects what to pass along and what to hold back. And General Munir has been holding something back. Something that has not appeared in any Western press report. Something that officials close to the Pakistan talks have described only as the document that both sides have seen, but neither side has acknowledged. That document, according to 3 sources familiar with the back channel, contains a framework for Iranian uranium enrichment that goes far beyond what either Witkoff or Arachi have stated publicly. It proposes a consortium model. Iran showed willingness to hand over 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium and accept zero enrichment under a consortium arrangement. 400 kilograms. That is enough fissile material to build multiple nuclear devices, surrendered in exchange for the economic lifeline Iran desperately needs. But here's what nobody is telling you. The consortium model only works if the Strait of Hormuz reopens first, and the strait only reopens if Israel stops striking Iranian arms factories. And Israel only stops striking Iranian arms factories if Netanyahu gets something, publicly, that allows him to claim victory to his domestic audience. And Netanyahu's hardline coalition partners have made clear that nothing short of total dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program counts as victory. We are not talking about a gap. We are talking about a chasm. And the cyber attack this morning, the one that wiped data from Israel's financial clearing network, just made that chasm wider. Iran has historically had mixed results with disruptive cyber attacks, and frequently fabricates and exaggerates their effects in an effort to boost psychological impact, said John Hultquist, chief analyst at Google's Threat Intelligence Group. That is critically important context. The claim that Israel's central banking grid was wiped to zero, that specific framing, is almost certainly an exaggeration. Iran does this, systematically. A single compromised server becomes a claimed facility-wide breach. A disrupted payment gateway becomes a wiped financial system. The information warfare is designed to cause panic, in Israeli markets, in Washington's confidence in Israeli stability, and in the diplomatic rooms where Witkoff is trying to close a deal. The attack is real. The scope of the claim is almost certainly inflated. But the timing, April 2nd, 2026, the morning before talks could resume, is not a coincidence. This is the IRGC hardliners sending a message to Arachi. We can blow this up, and we will if you give away too much. More than 1,900 people have been killed in Iran so far. Iran retaliated by firing missiles and drones at Israel and Gulf states, including Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. 1,900 dead in a country that has already watched its supreme leader assassinated, its Navy commander killed, its nuclear sites bombed, its internet cut to 1% connectivity, and its currency collapse in real time. The Iranian people are suffering in ways that the regime's propaganda cannot fully obscure, and Israeli military access to nearly all of the traffic cameras in Tehran, used in partnership with the CIA to target the airstrike that killed Khamenei, continues to give Israel battlefield awareness inside the Iranian capital that no previous adversary has ever had. Israel is watching Tehran in real time. That changes everything about the next 72 hours. Vice President J.D. Vance said on a podcast that the U.S. has accomplished all of its military objectives, and that President Trump would keep at it for a little while longer to ensure that once we leave, we don't have to do this again for a very, very long time. Mission accomplished. Those 2 words have a history in American foreign policy. The question is whether this is the beginning of a genuine exit or the beginning of a deeper entanglement that pulls in China, Russia, and reshapes the entire post-World War II security architecture. Russia's President Vladimir Putin is hoping the war will shift focus from his crimes in Ukraine. German Foreign Minister Johann Vadeful said during a meeting of G7 foreign ministers. G7 allies pressed Secretary of State Marco Rubio for clarity on Washington's Iran strategy. Putin is watching. China is watching. Beijing this week conveyed support to Tehran for Pakistan's mediation efforts. That is not a neutral gesture. China imports 40% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. If that strait closes permanently, the Chinese economy contracts by 3% in a quarter. Beijing has existential skin in this game, and Beijing is not going to allow a deal that leaves Iran permanently weakened and U.S. influence permanently dominant in the Persian Gulf without extracting something in return. This is the geopolitical domino effect in real time. The banking cyber attack this morning in Tel Aviv triggers a security review that delays diplomatic communications by 12 hours. Those 12 hours push a potential Rubio-Arachi call past the weekend. A weekend without a call means the April 6 Trump deadline arrives without a framework agreement. Without a framework agreement, Trump either blinks and loses credibility as a dealmaker, or he authorizes strikes on Iranian power plants. Strikes on power plants means the strait closes completely. Complete closure means $200 oil before sundown. $200 oil means global recession within 60 days. And somewhere in that 60-day window, the question of what happens to Iran's remaining nuclear material, the Khorramshahr-4 missile, capable of reaching Israel and U.S. bases across the region, deployed from underground mobile launchers, becomes the most urgent question on the planet. Here is where we are. Thursday, April 2nd, 2026. The diplomatic clock is ticking in Islamabad, in Washington, in Jerusalem, and in whatever remains of Tehran's command structure. Officials say the next 48 to 72 hours will determine whether this diplomatic push produces a meeting. What happens next will depend on decisions taken not in Islamabad, but in Washington and Tehran. Not Pakistan, not Oman, not the G7. Washington and Tehran. Two governments, one of which just had its supreme leader killed and its financial data wiped, and another whose president set a hard deadline that expires in 4 days. There are only two endings to this story. Either Arachi and Witkoff, or Arachi and Rubio, sit down in Islamabad this weekend, agree on a framework that includes a partial Strait opening, a uranium handover, an Israeli pause in strikes, and enough diplomatic cover for every leader to claim domestic victory. Or, the April 6 deadline arrives. Trump authorizes strikes on Iranian power plants. Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz completely. Oil spikes to $250. The S&P craters. And a conflict that started with one airstrike on February 28th becomes a war with no visible end, no clear winner, and consequences that every economy on Earth will feel for a decade. Deal or bombs. Breakthrough or collapse. The next 72 hours are not a metaphor. They are the actual, literal, binary choice that determines what kind of world we wake up in next week. Watch this space.